morning, everyone. So I'm kind of really excited. Katie, I felt it ironic, and I had to do this, because you and Jeff were saying how it's so hot up there in Canada, and Canada normally isn't associated with heat. In fact, I find it associated with quite the opposite, being covered in snow all the time. That's just me being a stereotypical American, thinking you guys are stereotypical Canadians. And I live in Arizona, which is stereotypically really, really hot. And right now, it's actually really, really nice out and nice and cool. And I actually had to wear a warm hat this morning when I went to class. And it's overcast everywhere, and it's probably gonna rain. I had to film outside because of that. Spencer, I actually agree with you on the point that everyone else was disagreeing on. Up to a point, I think that if we didn't have language and if we didn't have words, we couldn't really communicate, and that's just probably, there's gnats everywhere. That's probably just me taking things, once again, too literally, but I feel that language is something that actually helps us explain something and simplify it, even though it may not be in the most horribly efficient manner. I do think that there is no other way we could possibly explain it and communicate with each other on such things, and therefore I find it to be very efficient, and that nothing else would suffice. And that nothing else would suffice, to a point. Katie, going off of what you were saying, look, I have notes. Katie, going off of what you were saying about liking and disliking things on principle, I think that doing anything on principle is kind of dangerous, and that includes liking things and disliking things. And it's for the exact same reasons you were saying about disliking things, is that you don't really have your own formulated opinion, you're just kind of going off of what everyone else is saying. Well, that's kind of the same thing as liking something off of principle. You're still basing things off of the other people, and I do agree with you that it's easier to say that you like things more than you dislike things, and once again, it's for the exact same reasons, all of which you listed, but I think that liking things off of principle is kind of just as bad as disliking things on principle, because it's, once again, following those same reasons. But I do think we formulate our own opinions on things that we do like much quicker, and they're much easier to defend than things we dislike. There was a very key word you said in your last video, and that was experiences. And I agree with you. We all kind of have our own different opinions because none of us have gone through the exact same set experiences or circumstances, and we're all different in that respect, and we can never truly 100% understand and feel what another person is feeling. But I think it's really interesting to watch us as people. We attempt to do that anyway. We find ways to break down barriers, and even though it doesn't topple the entire metaphorical wall that separates us as humans, it helps us knock holes in it, and we can see into other people's lives. It's just a small glimpse of what they're really going through, and I think that's a kind of connection that we as humans crave. We're always trying to explain ourselves to others and have others understand us, because I think we all kind of like human interaction. But going off of all those experiences, and you started to talk about the color blue, I remember that very distinctively, and that's not just because I watched your video 5 times to make sure I covered all the important topics that I wanted to cover, but it is also because I have spent many hours thinking about this idea of perspective. When I say one thing, I have my own perspective, and when you guys hear, you have your own perspective on what I'm saying, what the actual meaning is, and what you perceive it to be. Now, there's a theory that I've heard from more than one person, and I came to the same conclusion myself, is that what if we all see things completely differently, like in the actual physical world? And I know that this isn't the case, but it's still a valid idea, and it's very interesting to think about. Like, let's say the color green for me is actually the color blue for you, but we call it the same thing. And let's say when I say brick, you hear hose. Now, we're both talking about this thing right here, but I say something and you hear a different thing, and yet our minds associate those things with the same thing. Like, it gets so complicated, because what if, let's say in my mind, everybody looks like dogs, but in your mind, everybody looks like llamas, and you're a llama, and that's normal for you, and it's not weird at all, because everyone else is llamas who drive cars and brush their teeth and wear clothes and stuff. But that's what I'm saying. If there could be such a drastic change in perspective in between individuals, what's to say it could stop something like that from happening? Because it's all kind of in our mind. What we see, what we touch, what we smell, what we feel inside of us, and what we hear, everything could be different for each individual person. And that's a very exciting idea, and that's kind of like taking the idea of perspective and blowing it completely out of proportion in a way that just makes my head hurt, and I love it so much. And I just think about that sometimes, like, you you get into these really intense quandaries with yourself, and they're just fun to think about. And it's such an interesting idea. It's not very valid, but the idea of it is just extraordinary. Like, what if fire looks like water to somebody else? Like water shooting up like that. Can you imagine that? Or if water's hot and fire is water, and you just get into this whole new mindset of how things could actually be perceived around you as something else other than they are. And we associate all these things as everyone else views them the same way, these actual physical objects. And I think that's something very interesting that we sometimes try to relate to our emotions, that if something is so 100% concrete for us, why isn't it for other people? Spencer, I will see you tomorrow.